Pokemon X and Y are some of the most hated Pokemon games of all time, and I'm here to tell you why I truly believe, in my humble opinion, that Pokemon XY is not only overhated, but very underappreciated. Let me explain. Now, it wasn't all at first. At first, Pokemon X and Y were beloved Pokemon games. People are ecstatic to finally get into a 3D Pokemon game for the very first time, and from the look of the trailers, it looked like a pretty good 3D Pokemon game. But not only that, but the introduction of a gimmick also made it all the more exciting. Now, a few fans were kind of annoyed by this, because Mega Evolutions at the time were pretty broken, and now looking back on it, yeah, they were kind of broken. Now, you might be asking, where did all the love go? And I'm here to tell you right now, it went straight to the garbage. After the following years of the X and Y games, when Oras released, everyone completely forgot about X and Y. People just regarded Oras as the better 3D game to play, and they just threw it in the dumpster, just like that. Now, I just realized that hate is a very strong word, and I'm not trying to guilt trip anyone to thinking that X and Y were perfect games, because they weren't. Pokemon X and Y had major flaws, like the wacky story and the unmemorable Pokemon characters. Yeah, it wasn't doing so hot. And of course, I can't forget about the infamous XP share system introduced in that same said region. It was really broken and very overpowered. But today's video isn't going to be explaining to you why Pokemon X and Y were perfect, because they just weren't, and I'd be lying to you guys if I said they were. Today's video is going to be explaining how underappreciated these Pokemon games were, and how much it impacted Pokemon games as a whole. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Pokey, and today's video is going to be about the most underappreciated Pokemon games in Pokemon history. Now that I'm done talking about Pokemon X and Y's flaws, do I necessarily think they're bad Pokemon games? No, I genuinely don't. And I'm comparing them to the actual bad Pokemon games, such as BDSP, and the absolute abomination that was. BDSP was an absolute mess. It introduced nothing new. It had no returning gimmicks. It had one new mechanic, I guess, and it brought back the battle tree. Because everyone loved the battle tree, right? The difference between BDSP and X and Y is that X and Y, I believe, is an actual decent Pokemon game. First and foremost, introduced 3D graphics, which, although is a heated debate in the Pokemon community, still a W nonetheless. Next up, it introduced the most beloved, and I would say the best gimmick of all time, Mega Evolution. It was the first ever Pokemon game to actually give you character customization, from skin color to hair to clothes. Like, come on, man! It finally gave us the fairy typing, which could actually counter dragon types, and dragon types' reign was finally over. It also helped balance the other typings. Poison was actually viable now, and it was actually a good counter against fairy types. At the time, dark types only had two weaknesses, which were bug and fighting, but now have a third weakness, which is fairy. Is fairy like an actual good typing? Yeah, some people will even say it's a little bit overpowered, which I might agree on. But even then, we can't just discredit the fact that it helped balance so many other typings, and buffing the bad ones that actually needed them, and nerfing the ones that were actually broken. Now let me talk about the XP share system in Pokemon X and Y. Were they broken? Of course, yeah, they were. I'm not saying they aren't. But I do feel like just using the XP share thing as your argument as to why Pokemon X and Y were quote-unquote bad Pokemon games is kind of a dumb and fallacious argument, don't you think? Pokemon games will always be easy, and of course there's a few Pokemon fights like the Ultra Necrozma fight and the Giratina fight in Legends Arceus that really stand out as a pretty difficult battle, but all in all, consistently speaking, Pokemon games are really easy. Let me take the Cynthia battle in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl and the Cynthia battle in BDSP as an example. The BDSP fight felt way easier than the actual Diamond and Pearl fight, and it's not because she got nerfed, because that's what people were saying at the time. It's because we're grown up. Most of us were just kids back then, and we didn't really know what we were doing. Didn't really understand Pokemon moves or typings all that much, and we were just trying to have fun at the time. But going into BDSP and finally fighting Cynthia felt more like a disappointment, because we imagined it as such a grand and ferocious battle, but it really wasn't. We just got better at the game. Now, can you say that Pokemon X and Y were easier than other Pokemon games? Yeah, of course, I have to agree on that front. But saying that it's the worst Pokemon game because of how easy it was, considering the fact that every Pokemon game is easy and we can pile through without the need of using overpowered Pokemon and all that, then that's kind of a dumb argument. Because having that be your argument and you're clearing a gym battle only 5 seconds faster than you normally would Come on, man, like, that sounds just so dumb. So I don't believe that only using the XP share argument is a valid enough argument to consider X and Y a truly bad Pokemon game. Because although I made the game a little more on the unhealthy side, every other Pokemon game suffers from this same issue, just to a lesser extent. Now that definitely is a flaw to X and Y, but it doesn't make it a horrible Pokemon game. Now these next few reasons are definitely more on the subjective side, so you guys can feel free to disagree with me if you want. Now it's a very fair assumption to guess that I'm being biased right now, because I am, I really am. But one of the biggest reasons I loved X and Y were the Pokemon and the aesthetic. Talonflame is one of the best regional birds we've ever gotten. Noivern I find really cool. Sylveon is one of the most beloved evolutions of all time, and I truly love Greninja, the GOAT. I don't need to say more about Greninja. I think X and Y introduced some of the best Pokemon ever, and just look at our pseudo-legendary. Look at Guja, he's such a cutie patootie. Not only that, but the music and the aesthetic of X and Y is just beautiful. I just loved going through Lumiere City, the playground route, and also the swamps. Like, it just felt so beautiful, and all of the music you're hearing in this video is coming from X and Y. Lysander was also a great villain in my opinion, talking about how Pokemon would only be used for tools and wars and battles and forcing them to do these things, and also humans and their greediness for selfish desires. It comes a lot from Black and White, which I consider one of the best Pokemon games of all time. The villain in the story was actually making sense, just going about it the classic villain way. Just imagine if we didn't have XP share today and how tedious it'd be to level up different Pokemon for evolutions and filling out the decks. That's all thanks to X and Y. Pokemon XY aren't perfect Pokemon games, but they're also far from being the worst. I don't ask for much, I just wish people would just appreciate the things it gave us and the things we even use today, and the impact it left on the Pokemon games overall. Overall though, I hope you guys change your perspective on XY as a whole, and start to appreciate the things it gave us, and just see that it isn't as bad as a game as people say it is. And I know this is really subjective and just my humble bias, but I truly think X and Y weren't all that bad. And that is my video on how I believe X and Y are the most underappreciated games in the Pokemon main series. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and it really means a lot to me that you guys can at least hear what I have to say. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.